Now let's talk about organizational movement, which is basically moving around the organization, because while I just showed you a fairly detailed prospecting cadence with a lot of touches, we should all be aware that there are still prospects that you'll still never get a hold of even going through all those steps. There are some prospects that just will never answer their phone and they will never reply to your email, regardless of what you say and regardless of how many times you call. There's nothing you can do about that, and that's just the world you live in, and that has to do with a lot of things we've already discussed, like your prospects being extremely busy and a lot of competition and whatnot, right? So based on the understanding that we've established of the prospects, it should not be a big shocker or a concern that you can make all those attempts and still not be able to become engaged. What the problem is that some salespeople do when they're not able to ever get engaged with their contact at a particular business, they then stop and move on to the next business. Well, what organizational movement is it's moving around the organization to find another contact or to find another way in. If you increase the number of contacts that you're trying to reach out to at an organization from 1 to 2, mathematically, even if both contacts are extremely difficult to get a hold of, you're mathematically increasing the odds of you getting in contact with one of them. You're kind of hedging your bet, right? The logic here is start with one contact, but when you're not able to get a hold of them, move on to find someone else. And so there's a process for this, and we call this organizational movement because you're moving around the organization trying to find someone else, but there's actually two types of organizational movement. There's vertical movement, which is moving up and down the organization. For example, let's say the key person that you're always trying to reach is the VP. Let's say the VP of IT, for example, which, by the way, VPs of IT are extremely difficult to get a hold of, right? So let's say you're trying to reach this person, they're not replying, you can't get a hold of them, right? When it's time to do organizational movement, what you can do is you can try to go above or below that person. So you could try to reach their boss. So if you're trying to reach the VP of IT, you could try to prospect to the CIO. Or you could go below and try to reach the director of IT. Adding those people into your cadence or into your prospecting pipeline, you're increasing your odds of getting in, as I mentioned. But that's vertical movement. There's also horizontal movement, which is moving sort of laterally in the organization across functional departments. So like I said, if you're trying to call into IT, in business-to-business sales, most likely you probably have 2 to 3 functional areas that you can sell into. This might not apply to everybody, but in most cases, whether you're aware of it or not, there probably are 2 areas. Even if you sell to IT and they're the ones who typically sign the check and do all this and that, it's likely that let's say you sell software, for example, or hardware or some sort of technical product. There's a very good chance that whatever that company buys from you, it impacts operations, for example. So when you're not able to get into the account by calling IT, maybe the VP of IT, you could move laterally to try to find someone to talk to in the operations department. And so if we look at the organization as a whole, what this might look like is we are trying to get to the VP of IT, and this person's extremely difficult. And if you make a number of attempts and can't get in and move on to the next account, and then you just try to call a VP of IT at the next account, and if you can't get a hold of that person, then you move on to the next account, your success will be much lower than if when you can't get a hold of this person, you move laterally and horizontally to contact all of these other people. Now, there could still be a chance that you try to contact all these other people and you still can't get in. But you are tremendously improving the odds of you being able to talk to someone. Maybe not get in, but you're at least improving the odds that you talk to someone by doing organizational movement. A great tool to use as part of this process is LinkedIn. The average employee is fairly motivated to use LinkedIn for different reasons. When they get promoted or get a new job, they often want to broadcast that and show everybody that they got promoted. So they'll often put their new position on LinkedIn. Employees at companies are also motivated to keep their LinkedIn profile up to date, so they might find new opportunities and get recruited. You may have the contact, which is the VP of IT, off a list of leads that you bought or list of contacts that you bought. But when you're not able to get a hold of that person, go to LinkedIn and type in that company, and you can do different searches looking for departments or different individuals. And usually you can use sort of like the one contact that you have to find a whole different set of other people at that organization that might not be on your initial list of leads that you bought, but you can use LinkedIn to find those other people to use organizational movement for. You can actually combine organizational movement with your prospecting cadence. And just to give you an example, let's say you start with a VP of IT and you start with your prospecting cadence round one, right? So you go through week one, you go through week two, you're pausing, you're not giving up yet, you know that this person's extremely hard to get into, you roll into week two, week three, you're sending your second cold email, you're calling them again, you leave another voicemail, you're pausing. At the end of round two, this is a really good time to initiate your organizational movement. So when you press pause on that prospect, then you can shift gears, go try to find another contact at the organization, maybe go to LinkedIn. When you find that person, you're then going to start your prospecting cadence round one with the new contact. So now you send your cold email to the new contact. At this point, you'll have two different contacts at the organization in your prospecting cadence. You'll actually have two different cadences going on. So it's not just one cadence, but you're basically working two different contacts at that organization. And then you progress through the cadence with only really one step of organizational movement. What this allows you to do is once the initial contact drops off is when you're going to basically pick up a new contact from by the second contact progressing to the end of round two. I personally feel like this is a really balanced approach where you're not spending too much time on the one account. You know, if you have a set of accounts or territory that you're trying to work through, this is a fairly not too aggressive approach. Now, if you only have a couple accounts, you could get much more aggressive with this. You could do, let's say, organizational movement every time you press pause on a particular contact. That will load up your activity list with different callbacks for a lot of contacts at that one account. And that could really put a big thrust in you getting into that account. The downside to that is that, let's say you have a territory or you have an account list that you're trying to work, you could end up spending too much time on one account. So the one step of organizational movement is sort of a balanced approach, but just that's one example there of how to get some ideas of combining your prospecting cadence with organizational